Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another Lunch and Learn session with Purple. Today, we've got another fantastic guest speaker, Ronny Hendricks. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I'm sure he's got an introduction already, but I'm just going to give you a quick run about what to expect at the moment. You may not be able to unmute yourselves or turn on video. That's okay. Please post any questions or comments in the chat. What I'd like you to do is just in the chat, tell us who you are, what you do, and just say hi, just so everyone's here and everyone's engaged. And once we get started, please post your questions and comments in the chat. Now, as you're all aware, Purple Training Purple Limited is a training provider. We do apprenticeships, skills bootcamps, and on occasion tailor-made programs as well. Right now, we're focused on accessibility, and today's topic is a particularly interesting one. So I'm going to just wait one more minute to see if anyone else is in the waiting room before handing over to Ronny. Okay, great. I think we've got a few people here. Ronny, over to you.
Oh, all right. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be here today with you. Yeah, today I wanted to talk about accessibility maturity and provide you with hopefully a bit of a framework on how you can either make progress in that or keep track of it. As a bit of an introduction myself, so my name is Ronny Hendricks. I've been in the accessibility space since about 2001, so I go quite a way back. Been in various roles from web development to team leads to accessibility specialist, etc. Some people might know I've worked at Nemensa previously, where we've given similar sessions like this with colleagues for Purple Beards, and today is my turn. I am based in the Netherlands. I am currently back to freelance work and focusing less on audits and technical remediation and more on things like building capabilities. So yeah, today's topic is accessibility grown up, going from compliance to capability. Clicked. Sure, I can get my slides. So the main question is, why does accessibility keep failing? From my experience, that is rarely ever a question of bad intent, but quite often organizations just lack the structure and the sustainable means to make accessibility stick around. We typically see a reactive process, where the root cause generally is not having clear ownership, and we end up in a bit of a cycle. So we see that organizations react after the facts, meaning people start running as soon as legislation comes into play. We saw that a couple of years ago, of course, with a big influence. And these days, it's either if it's around the European Accessibility Act, people start to run as soon as market supervisors start knocking at their door, or in the UK, we can see that happening with public sector bodies if GDS comes and pays you a visit and they've done a review of your stuff. The typical cycle for most organizations is, all right, we either need to comply or somebody has complained. So we're going to do an audit, create a baseline, and then hopefully they get time and budget to actually remediate those changes. And you end up in a bit of a repeat cycle with that, meaning that things get fixed. But if there's no structure around accessibility, we typically see regressions play up and either the same or new accessibilities being introduced into a product as a result. Because even though people went through the list and fixed everything, there is no guidance for them to learn how to prevent accessibility issues in the future. A lot of that has to do with weak central governance, where we have a lot of organizations that have a privacy officer and a security officer that deal with those parts of compliance. We're only just now starting to see more organizations have a look at maybe we should also have a compliance officer for accessibility. There's also a lot of organizations where things like procurement happen ad hoc. So instead of having a central procurement team, every project team within the organization, so to speak, has their own budget. And if they want a website within that budget, they are free to procure one and host one. But those people generally don't know that there are security and privacy and also accessibility requirements that go along with it. And the big problem is that the organization at large generally also doesn't know these sites exist. One of my current clients, when I started there 2 months ago, thought they had about 40 websites live. And with me digging around, the list has so far grown to 106. So there were 66 websites that nobody centrally was aware of. And obviously, all of those have the same legal requirements when it comes to accessibility as well. So big challenges ahead. So what are some common pitfalls that we see in organizations? We see things run by one specialist that has to do it all. Somebody that has to do all of the coordination. They might even be responsible for conducting audits or at least procuring them and then interpreting the results, going back to another provider or an internal development team to get things fixed. They're then also responsible for supporting those people because they are the accessibility specialist. So hopefully today's framework will also provide you with a tool to start tracking information on how your organization is handling accessibility, what it's doing well, and where things still need improvement. And it allows you to track, I've been doing X, Y, Z, but I don't have the time and capacity to do other things as well. Which should hopefully provide you with data that you can go to your own supervisor and say, well, we need more capacity or we need to defer things to a later point in time. Except another common pitfall is just doing audits only. Sometimes they get acted, but I've also had plenty of situations where a client returned to me a year or two later, said, well, we did an audit with you 2 years ago. And yeah, sorry, it's been sitting in the drawer for the past 2 years. The product has significantly changed, and can we do it again, please? Obviously, like I'm happy to do another audit, but it is very very sorry, of course, that those results have basically gone stale because nobody acted upon them. Another common pitfall we see a lot is policy on paper. I quite often compare this to greenwashing, where you might be familiar with the term, but that's basically an organization saying, well, we're doing XYZ for the environment. Meanwhile, they do a whole lot of other things that are very bad for the environment. Or another example would be pride washing, where an organization takes a pride event and does uh, all the marketing around it, but they just do it for the exposure and not necessarily because they actually care. Um, the same happens with accessibility. So we're seeing accessible or alley washing, accessibility washing as a result of it. There's something on paper, but in practice, there's not that much actually done. Um, the final pitfall that I wanted to highlight out is standalone training. So I've done a lot of training over the years, but quite often it's a single session, and then people are left on their own afterwards, thinking that all right, now we've done a single training session. Now we know what accessibility entails. There's even trainings available that say, well, you can do a 5-day training course, and now you're an accessibility specialist. Um, you're all doing the apprenticeships. You all know how much hard work it is and how nuanced and difficult it can be, and that it is not a single training or a multi-day training effort. So you're very well aware of that a single piece of training won't fix the problem, as it were. Um, so with building maturity, we're looking for stronger signals. So we want clear ownership, somebody that is accountable for accessibility in your organization, like an accessibility officer or a C-suite member that has it on their list of responsibilities. Um, we want accessibility to sit within normal work. So it has to um, basically become business as usual. But another aspect of this is that I think we should look at ways where we can integrate accessibility improvements into what people are already doing on a daily basis. Um, Whenever you're dealing with change management, which implementing accessibility in essence is, you're dealing with friction. People need to do something different than what they're used to doing. Um, and they certainly don't want to do extra work because everyone's already busy and they have enough on their plate already. So a strong signal is to look for ways how you can explain to people that there's a lot of improvements that they can already make by making very minor changes that take them little or no extra effort. Another strong signal would be follow through. So accessibility is handled through regular workflows, which means there is a process, for example, with product development, where information goes from design to development. There's things that designers obviously can do in terms of things like annotations, and then there's developers that need to do the implementation. But there needs to be a translation layer, a follow through between those areas. And accessibility sits in between there because we can't really expect the designers to know everything they need to do to tell the developers, and vice versa. So you need to have basically a follow through translation step in between. Measured progress, that's where the accessibility maturity model, I think, shines because it allows you to define points and track how well or not so well you're doing on each different aspect. And you break that down into individual actions eventually. It allows you to then do periodic reports when it comes to, all right, this is what we've done over the last 3 or 6 months. This is where we've made progress. This is still outstanding, etc. So that then things become measurable instead of you just running around across the organization doing bits and pieces left and right. One of the key things is creating shared understanding. Um, whenever I join a new organization, I typically find that the understanding of digital accessibility gets lost in translation. So um, a lot of people that don't know what accessibility is about might actually confuse it with the literal availability of the website. Is the website online? Can people reach and find it instead of can people reach it and use it? So creating shared understanding within an organization around what it entails helps the cause massively. And finally, another strong sample would be lived experience counts, which means including people with disabilities into your tasks from preferably user research, but the accessibility model also um, is a tool to examine whether somebody with lived experience is actually able to work at your place of employment. Does your organization provide all of the structures for somebody with a disability to be able to uh, apply, join, and be uh, be able to conduct work there, for example. Um, So we want to go from reaction to repeatable practice, from firefighting to mature practice, which includes shared responsibilities, central government, clear expectations, and measurable progress. As a bit of a summary. Um, in my opinion, a maturity model can help really well with this problem, uh, as it were. Um, I prefer to look at the W3C accessibility maturity model. Um, there's more out there. I know in the UK, AbilityNet has one, Level Access has one. There's multiple organizations that have created their own versions of them. Um, all of them are great. They're all a tool to use. The reason I prefer the original, the W3C version is that it's open source. So all of the information you need is readily available and you're not bound to a single supplier in that sense. Um, it is fairly complex at first glance, which is something I'm trying to solve, but um, it it is because it covers a wide spectrum of your organization. Um, and gives a more holistic view. It also is very flexible, so you can definitely make it less complex by reducing the scope, saying I'm just going to look at a little part for now and expand as I go along. I will have a look shortly at what that would look like. But yeah, so the benefit is it looks at the whole system at multiple parts of your organization instead of just the web team or the communication team. It goes beyond audits and aims to support people doing the work in across the spectrum, from procurement to personnel support, HR, to the design and development teams, to overall training of staff, etc. And it goes beyond good intent. It's a way of gathering data on how you're doing with accessibility, and it provides you with a way to review and plan. So the maturity model talks about 7 dimensions. Like I said, it looks at the whole system, and it as a central point, it says accessibility capability requires that whole system eventually to be to become mature and sustainable. We'll go into each of these dimensions quickly over time, but there's communication, oversight and culture, the ICT development lifecycle, knowledge and skills, Number five is personnel. We have procurement and we have support. Some of the namings speak for itself. Some will need a little bit of an introduction later down the line. What it then does is there's a concept called proof points. This is basically your evidence statements. Things formulated in a way where you can say, all right, yes, we're doing this, and there's a level in how well we're doing this. They allow you to be able to choose what you need to measure. If you, after this talk, go and look up the maturity model documentation, you'll see that there's a lot, like over 100 example proof points already available. And again, with the flexibility, it allows you to say, well, I'm going to track this one, but I'm not going to track the other 9 ones in this dimension because either they're not relevant for my organization or we're nowhere near that point in time yet. They're individual points, but you can adapt and extend to what is relevant to what you want to track or to the points your organization has or not. Going back to the dimension, the same goes for the dimension. So if you have an organization that does not have a procurement department, that dimension would be a lot smaller. I'm assuming you're still buying products, so there are some processes that you could track, but it might be a lot smaller. The same with personnel. Like if you're in a very small organization that has outsourced their HR team, you would be tracking different kind of proof points for that dimension than if you're in a 200 or 2,000 person organization that has a big HR department to keep things rolling. Some quick examples of proof points. So within the procurement dimension, for example, one of the proof points could be that we have a standard template with accessibility requirements that is actually used. And you can make proof points really specific. So you could say our procurement documentation has clear requirements around WCAG conformance, or our procurement documentation demands that a supplier provides a conformance report before we are even allowed to purchase something. For oversight and culture, accessibility is a standing agenda item with actions and follow-ups in things like your business meetings or for tracking progress in C-suite. Oversight and culture is very much about the guardrails that enable accessibility, policies, funding, that kind of thing. And for support, that is, are we supporting ourselves or customers? We're actively tracking accessibility issues that come in. So if somebody files a complaint, we're tracking them separately and making sure that they're followed up and they lead to an improvement. You can create proof points around that process as well. Here's a little bit more of a breakdown into what that could look like as individual proof points or actions for future reference. So in the end, what we're doing is we're gathering evidence and we're looking for specific types of evidence. Weak signals or weak evidence would be things that are informal. Just verbal agreements, for example, are very informal. So you want to have things documented and you want that documentation of processes to remain current. A weak signal, again, it's held by one person or one team. You want a shared responsibility. Doesn't mean that everyone has to do everything, There can still be it could still be you after you've finished your apprenticeship and take an accessibility position as sort of the person that orchestrates and supports people in doing individual tasks. Um, but ideally, it's not you doing everything. Um, Another, you want things that aren't outdated or no longer used. You want to keep track of making sure that things are up to date. Um, in the end, we want things to be used by multiple people. We want it to be reviewed in a cadence. So there should be a feedback loop, which the model maturity model allows for you. So you can say, well, I'm going to review this in 3 months or in 6 months or in 9 months, and say, all right, where have we made improvement? What still needs to be done? And finally, again, we don't want it to be hero dependent, mostly because you might be the accessibility hero in one organization. And then, like everyone else, and most people, um, after a couple of years, you're very likely to move on to a different place. So if the whole company's accessibility strategy depends on you doing the thing, and you leave, the whole house will come. Yeah, like a house of cards that comes crashing down, of course. Um, with the other emotional risk there that you are essentially guilt locking yourself into a position because if I leave, everything crumbles, which is not a position you want to emotionally be in or should be in for that matter. Um, so once we have proof points and we have evidence, we're able to determine what the maturity level of that proof point is. There's 4 levels within the model. Those levels are borrowed from another policy called the US Policy-Driven Adoption for Accessibility Maturity Model. It's a mouthful. Um, the 4 levels are inactive. So there is little or no awareness, activity, or recognition of need. And next up is launch, which starts basically from whenever the need is recognized. So if you know you need to do a thing, you're already at a launch level, so to speak. And then you can start planning. But the work might not have been started, or if it's started, things are still very much happening ad hoc. Once you start defining proof points, these are the 2 most common occurrences, as you might expect. Defining that and defining those proof points with the evidence, you can follow that up with actions. And once you start executing on those actions, that's how you move up to the level of integrate. So you have a roadmap that exists and the overall approach is defined and organized. Um, you know where you stand, you know where you need to be, and you know you have a plan and a route to get where you need to be. Um, and then the final one is optimize, which means things are solidly embedded across an organization, and you can start to iterate to make other improvements, and you're reviewing them constantly. Um, Having worked in various accessibility organizations over the years, even within those organizations that are in this field, optimize is, I would say, still like a very far goal. But getting to a level of integrate and making those um, little steps to improve things is definitely doable for pretty much every organization. Um, and it's where you'll spend a lot of your time really. And that's fine. In the end, even if it's small steps, we want progress over perfection. Like it's never done anyways. Even on an optimized state, you're still looking to see, all right, how can we still further improve things? Um, but yeah, they help at least give a bit of a rough level and indication to report back on. Um, all right. So now that we've touched upon the core pillars of the model, let's have a look at some of the different dimensions. Like I said, each dimension touches on a bit of a different aspect of the organization. But as we've also will also notice is that in the end, you're basically creating a spider web of sorts because dimensions do touch upon each other. There's overlap between dimensions as well. Um, there's a separate dimension on training and how you structure training in general, but then there's can be different proof points within communication or procurement or IT or design to have their own training sessions. So there's overarching connections, as it were, that you'll soon pick up on. Which also means that there can be blockers that prevent that from happening, which then becomes a new proof point to say, right, this is something we need to look into to see how we can solve that. So number one is communications. So this is basically if you have a communications department, this is where you would start speaking to them and seeing what their needs are and how you can help them out. But this is how accessible your information is, whether you're using Word templates that have accessibility features defined, for example. For example, word styles are set up correctly and they are used. Like a lot of times I see Word documents where word styles are used, but the person that set up the original template didn't make a heading level one a heading level one. It's still all paragraphs. They're just different font sizes and different colors. It's about accessibility statements and having your accessibility conformant reports ready for products that you have. You might have heard of the word VPAT, which is basically the voluntary product accessibility template. It's the empty version of an accessibility conformance report. If you want to fill one of those in, look for the term VPAT instead. And you'll find them. This dimension also touches upon how you deal with social media. Does your team know that they need to provide alt text and what adequate alt text is? Do they know that if they're working with video, that they need to make sure that there's captions for videos, and how can they do that? That's all kinds of proof points and follow-up actions that you can define within this dimension. Next up is oversight and culture. So this is more of the overarching organizational dimension, looking at how the organization at large treats accessibility, sets its priority, how are we assigning responsibilities, etc. So things that you want to look out for here in terms of proof points is, do we have an executive sponsor that at a board level is willing to stand up for accessibility being important? How is accessibility reflected in your mission and your vision and your values as an extent? Policy work also happens in this dimension. So to make sure that things get embedded, you might need to create company policies for different departments. That all falls into this dimension, as well as the budget and plans, of course. Um, so basically, a lot of what enables you to do your work, either your own role, but also other things within the organization, um, and how easy and or difficult that is to realize and get budget and approval for example, that all sits in terms of proof points. That all sits in this dimension. Third up is the IT development lifecycle. I've added the common one, Wink. Um, Whenever most people talk about digital accessibility, they're basically only talking about this dimension. Um, so this is the one most people will be familiar with. This is also within the model, the one that has the most predefined proof points. And people will typically find it the easiest to start filling out, as it were. But this basically covers your whole product life cycle from ideation to research to design to implementation to quality assurance. That whole cycle falls into this dimension. So things you might want to look out for here is design annotations, um, who's checking what before a release, but also a place where you can start putting product release gates in. So what are some hard cutoffs to say, um, eh, ideally you want a product to not go live unless it's passed accessibility testing as well. And how do you implement that in your processes? That all fits within this dimension. Knowledge and skills is a bit of a it's one of those dimensions that is easy to branch off into the different ones. Um, Within this dimension specifically, you're looking at how are we in general providing training and how can accessibility latch into that? But also, is the way we do training accessible? Um, this is also where you would define the need for a knowledge gap analysis. So do some research across the different teams to understand what their current level of understanding of digital accessibility is and where the gaps are so that you can then tailor learning plans as needed. Um, this is also the place where you start embedding it. So instead of having that standalone trainer come in, uh, you might want to look into getting in contact with, or either providing your own training or getting in contact with a qualified provider to start building training material that becomes a part of your internal upskilling process. Um, you want accessibility to be available on demand, basically, as accessibility training. It might also be one of those dimensions that is not directly applicable to your organization. If your organization says, well, you have a training budget, you can do whatever training you want. We're not centrally providing things. Uh, you will end up with different proof points to try and get people to spend their training budget on accessibility training. Um, This is also where you want to try and lock in the refresh, coaching, and tracking part. Who did the training? When are they revisiting the training? So preferably they do a bit of an update manually or bimanually. Um, it's also yeah. As a whole, this dimension ensures that you build knowledge internally and that knowledge remains available even if key people move on to a different role and somebody else steps in. Personnel, like I said, it's about making sure that people with a disability are able to join your organization. Do you have an accessible hiring flow? Are people able to apply? Um, there's a Once they're in, is there a route for employee input? where can they go if they need reasonable adjustments for their workplace, for example. All kinds of proof point topics for this dimension. And then procurement is obviously about how you're buying your product. So you want to make sure that there's requirements that are pretty specific. So it shouldn't say product needs to be accessible. Be more specific in like it needs to meet WCAG 2.2 conformance. And there needs to be evidence that it does instead of a supplier just saying, yes, yes, it conforms, prove it. Make sure that you have qualified reviews of that as well. So if they provide you with an ACR or with an accessibility report, make sure that somebody's able to confirm whether that holds any actual weight as well. Like, is it an internal assessment? Is it an external assessment? Is the external assessment provider a reputable one? Does the demo environment match up with the report? Do some spot checks on accessibility failures, etc. And make sure that these checks also happen at renewal stages or when changing products, etc. That all falls in the procurement dimension. And the final one is support. So support deals with anything supporting both internal employees as well as external customers with accessibility related issues. So it's about general awareness, but also how are you dealing with accessibility feedback, both from an employee perspective as well as your customers. Do they know where they can provide feedback, and how is that feedback dealt with? It's also about training staff in general to know how to treat people with a disability as a coworker, for example. Obviously, they're just like everyone else. They're human beings, and you treat them with respect. But sometimes it might be appropriate to have a session, preferably with the other employees included, if they are open to that, to have a conversation around, all right, what can you say, what can't you say, how do you generally interact in a positive way with people that isn't discriminative or ableist, things like that. So there's a whole lot of information, but where do you start? Like I said, the beauty of this model is that you can be very flexible in what you want to track and what you don't yet want to track. So you don't have to do everything as one. You can start where you are now. You can start it as a framework for organizational change, but you can also start using it as a way of keeping track of what you're doing yourself with accessibility. And like I said, gather data for either more capacity or for future road mapping, things like that. So it's very flexible in that start. But once you start, have a look at things like defining scope. Choose the relevant dimensions. What do you want to track? What can you track? Which dimensions are irrelevant for your organization? Things like that. If you want, you can invite stakeholders for those dimensions. So you could, for communications, you can start talking with the communications team. For personnel, you can start chatting with HR to see, all right, what are we already doing? Not to be the police officer and say, well, you're doing a bad job. No, just to gather data, and then you can process this into, all right, this is what we're already doing. This is what we should be doing, and start defining your roadmap at that level. Let's say you want to get your current level of where you stand. Visibility is also a key thing in there. There's a lot of things you might know, you might assume, but there's probably also a lot of things that you don't yet see. Um, so that and then defining the proof points helps others to also see what is being done and what still needs to be done. Yeah, in the end, you want to go from a snapshot to a plan. So once you've gathered the initial things, you can start defining your proof points, and you say, well, for example, every website has a named owner. That's currently not the case. There's not been any stock taking yet. So we will either label that as inactive, or because we're already planning for it, we could even label it as launch. The problem definition is, well, there's no clear owners. The action would then be we need to name an owner or find the owner, because most of the time they do exist, except nobody knows where and we've not documented it. We can agree who reviews that and set a fixed point in time. Let's say in 6 months' time, I'm going to review this proof point and see how many owners have I found. The end goal being that the owner is named, reviews have happened, and actions are followed through. So you're basically creating your roadmap in this way. And then it's a matter of track and repeat. So you track the evidence you have. You have that review process. So you don't need to constantly update it, but you can say, well, in 3 months' time, I'm going to update my proof points to see what has happened since and how has the evidence changed. Then you can adjust both your maturity level if you need to, or you can adjust the actions that you need to take. Maybe you figured something new out that also requires a separate action, and then that's a matter of rinse and repeat. These some legacy slides around how to track that. Basically, it's the original model provides an Excel sheet, which is a hideous monster of an Excel sheet, to be honest. I would argue either make your own trackable list that is simplified to your situation with your dimensions, your proof points, et cetera, et cetera. And you can do that on a dimension level. So you can say, well, dimension procurement, these are my proof points, this is the status. And then breaking that down into your individual proof points. So what are you currently seeing? What are you currently observing? What is still missing? And when are you going to review it? And then for the what is still missing part, you can create an action tracker that says, all right, within the procurement dimension, there's an owner for a task, there's evidence that needs to be gathered, and there's another review point. Key thing being, unless you want to create a complete like a complete organizational overhaul project, which probably nobody wants, keep it small. Have an owner, either you or a delegated owner, that works on the evidence, update the evidence, and review often enough to keep yourself up to date, but also keep the rest of the organization up to date on what's happening. Again, in terms of that capability, like literal capability and time spent and time needed data. Over the past couple of weeks, I've been working on a little tool I've called CAPLY. Stands for Capability Accessibility. It's very much still in beta, but it's my way of creating a web version to be able to track all of this. It's live. There's no tracking, and there's all kinds of things that, well, you can play around with it, create an account, play around with it some more. Updates will follow once it goes live as an open source project. But it aims to very closely follow the W3 model structure to allow you to hopefully more easily track your maturity model progress and create reports that should be able to you can share internally as well. So yeah, hopefully this brought you a little bit more insight into the maturity model from W3C, and it gives you a little bit of a tool to prevent you from having to do a whole lot of fighting of fires all across the organization and go to repeatable good practices. I think we have enough rambling from me. There might be some questions. To want to give some time for Q&A, but overall, thank you for being here. Thank you for having me, and hope it's been insightful.
Thank you, Ronnie. I can say for sure that it has been insightful. I'm not going to question that at all. Accessibility maturity models is something that I know a lot of the students that we've got attending today, as well as a couple of their managers, have been looking at, I'm sure. So I'm going to now open up the chat and also allow everyone to unmute themselves to see if you've got any questions. And just as an update, a couple of people have put comments in the chat. One is Roberta. She says, thank you. This was very useful. Roberta is an apprentice manager. She's actually quite active and interacts with us quite frequently. Thank you, Roberta. We've also got Claire, who said, thank you so much, Ronnie. I've got to drop off now for another training session, but I'll definitely catch the rest in the recording.
Yeah, this was really good. There's definitely some things here in your presentation in terms of procurement and just going back and just checking what we're doing as an organization to kind of really improve stuff. So thank you for that.
You're more than welcome. As you might have seen, because I'm still sharing my screen, I've copied the link to the slides into the chat as well for people to refer back to at a later point.
Yep. Great. I've also added a link to capally.com.
Yep.
So anyone who'd like to, a couple of things. One, if you'd like to review the slides, you can do that. You can look at this project that Ronnie's been working on and probably share some comments, questions, maybe help develop it further for specific use case scenarios.
It's definitely, I'm definitely open to feedback. It's nowhere near done. It's also probably still has bugs. So by all means, play with it. Don't put any. Although I've taken care of security, etc. to an extent, don't yet put any data in there that you don't trust. Also, because it's still in beta, don't put anything in there that you don't care to lose. Because if something changes and the database needs to be updated, I'm trying to mitigate any data loss, but it's not fully open source yet. It had a good what's it called, fire bath in a workshop last weekend where about 15 people played with it as well. So but that also yielded plenty of feedback to make initial improvements. But yeah, open to feedback, and like I said, I have all the intentions to hopefully open source it in a way that we can actually attach it to the W3C model itself, because their current implementation of the Excel sheet is lackluster and very confusing, to say the least.
Okay, brilliant. Now, I'm going to just go around and ask if anyone's, so you did mention, Ronnie, during your presentation, you did mention the 7 different dimensions to consider when not just building, but also applying the best practice and also setting things up so that you've got a workable plan. For those of you in attending today, are there any areas or any specific dimensions that you see as having common blockers? Because again, that's one other thing that you mentioned, that there will be blockers that are unique to each of these. I mean, I'm going to bring the question to the chat, but if there are no questions, that's one to consider. That's one that I've been thinking about. I think communication is something that we assume would be straightforward, but there's always issues when it comes to communication. Are the instruction sets clear? Are the expectations clear? Yep,
Hello?
Chris.
Yeah. Hi, yeah, it's Chris. Sorry, was it okay to jump in to talk?
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
So, a lot of what you said there, I'm a manager, by the way. One of my team is doing the apprenticeship. We've been working within accessibility for a number of years now with limited success. And dare I say it, possibly the biggest challenge we have is that people don't care or they don't get it. And when we put together awareness programs and we've done limited training, we've demonstrated the impact of not delivering accessible content digitally primarily. You always get the light bulb moment in almost every single person where they go, oh, right, yeah, I see, that makes sense. I understand now. We've got 10,000 staff, and we've got a 10% turnaround per annum. And so we can do 6 months of work, but we've got other responsibilities as well. So we can push it, and then we have to draw back a little bit. And then we kind of see it's all falling by the wayside again. And it's just getting people to care and getting that message out broadly to healthcare people who are not sat in front of a computer every day to help them understand why they've got an important role in inclusive communication, whether that's verbal, whether that's the printed leaflets we give people, or whether it's the online resources we provide.
Yeah.
That's stumped, yeah.
I mean, obviously, yeah, that is, it's. I think definitely that's a problem that scales with size, right? So the bigger the organization, the bigger this problem technically becomes, because you need to reach more people, and you can only, depending on measures, you can only reach so many people. Like, to reach 10,000 people's or 10,000 people, like, and 1,000 people, new people annually, is is a is a ginormous undertaking. I think there's a way to, because obviously I'm assuming that there is a form of mandatory training slash onboarding for people in general.
So we've tried to get some form of inclusive communication mandatory training built into our organization, and it gets knocked back every single time. There's so much mandatory training for our clinical staff that's deemed to be, and probably is, from a patient immediate perspective, more important. And I understand that. But that's clearly what we need. We've tried a few different angles. We know that there is a need to have what's the word I'm trying to think of? There's various different modules of our mandatory training that we think we can tag on to. And we're thinking maybe that's the approach, is to actually look at where we can tag a bit of our message onto somebody else's training, whether that's the EDI training, for example, is possibly a good example of that. But even then, that then makes what's already a lengthy module that people are reluctant to do, because it takes them 45 minutes every year, and they're very busy clinicians. And you add another 20 minutes onto it just as a flavour, and that is just a flavour of what you're talking about and why we're here. It's challenging. It's really difficult.
Yeah, it is. I don't think I have a ready to go answer. Obviously, otherwise you wouldn't have probably struggled with it for so long already. So
appreciate your honesty.
Yeah. I mean, it's in terms of the maturity model, it sits in various dimensions, of course, right? So there's the training part. There's the management part of it, and getting people to understand. The shame is that it's like it's obviously it's in a healthcare situation, so the percentage of people with disabilities or people with needs in general, whether we would classify them as disabilities or not, is higher. People are often in a situation where they need extra care. It's also a landscape where, in general, like language is complicated, and
It's not just that.
yeah,
I mean, our particular organisation is a healthcare trust in the NHS, so we specialise obviously in supporting people with all sorts of cognitive and various different NDs.
yeah,
But also, we're a very inclusive employer, and I think statistically we have one of the higher rates of people that acknowledge they have their own disability of
mhm,
any employer in our area. So it's not just our external stakeholders; it's
yeah,
the internal ones as well. So there's a real appetite out there within that staff group for us to push this agenda. I'm part of the disability steering group in my organisation, and I report back on what we've done. But it's just I just keep hitting walls. It's just
mhm,
so difficult. And we're trying to get champions, but one of the challenges that we find is that it's very easy to fall into an area of understanding that feels techy, and then that
yeah,
puts people off as well. I mean, we've started to use the Sculpt principles that was developed by one of our county councils in the UK, which
mhm.
is have you heard of Sculpt? Have you come across Sculpt before?
Mm,
So
it
it simplifies things
does
down
ring a bell, but
to structure, use of images, color and contrast,
okay.
tables, hyperlinks, things like that, and it just tries to make it really distill down into something that's understandable. But even that, you mentioned hyperlink to 90% of my colleagues, and they start thinking, "Oh no, that's websites. That's nothing to do with me. That's
Yeah,
difficult for me to understand."
yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah,
the
sorry.
organization I'm currently in created a bit of guidance on what's basically using easy read format,
Mm,
or at least more normal language for the people, for lack of better words. We call it just clear language. That's what we've gone with. But even getting, and this is a municipality, so there's a lot of like policy language going around, etc., etc. Just getting people to understand that what they're doing is basically for the people, but the people can't read and understand what they're doing.
mm,
Yeah, it's a similar hard message to get across, and uh, yeah, I mean, this is a much smaller organization, so I'm currently trying to tackle it with more in-person awareness sessions. So we're basically running sessions where we people can sign up, and we're actively inviting upper management to come take part,
mm,
even though they have a busy schedule, um, to get a bit of an understand, get a description from me, or so this is what digital accessibility is about, and the importance to the general population in this case. And that followed up by people with lived experience giving a demonstration and or feedback on some of the documents that these people have written. So, well, all right, if I'm reading this, these are the problems I'm running into, or if I'm using this, these are the problems I'm running into. Um, don't know how that would that yeah, it's again a question of scale. Like I'm talking about an organization of like less than 1,000 people, and so you run into a different scale problem altogether again, I think. Yeah.
yeah. No, thank you. No, I appreciate that. I have to go. Sorry, but thank you very much for the call. I
Okay.
appreciate it. Cheers.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Chris. That had me thinking. I think involving more people, whether it's internal or external, during the testing process is probably the only way to say, look, this is something that, like you mentioned this during your presentation, where this is what's working, this is what's broken, this is where we need to make improvements so that we're more accessible. But I understand where he's coming from. There are more conversations happening now, for sure, but that doesn't really always translate into actual improvements going forward, which is probably why a framework like this is, it's probably helpful. Right. Do we have any other questions in the chat? Irina's just said, thank you, Ronny. Very interesting presentation. Great how different elements, dimensions were broken down into easy follow-through sections and instructions. I definitely now have a better structured awareness of how to at least approach accessibility topic basics. Great. Thank you, Irina.
Oh,
All right, fantastic.
Chris also.
Chris has put in the Sculpt for Accessibility link from...
I'll have a look at that this afternoon.
Yes, that'd be useful.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Okay, brilliant. Great. Now, before we sign off and close for the day, are there any other questions or comments from anyone else who's around and still here? Any last-minute conversations you'd like to start? Nope, doesn't look like it. Right, so...
Well, if people have any further questions, they can always reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to chat with folks, and so feel free to reach out if you want to.